Hey everybody, I'm Lawrence. Welcome to this episode of Dirty Basement Terrain. I was scrolling in Discord and I saw this picture by Mia Geeked of her work in progress of some rocks. And the comment that I don't I'm paraphrasing this comment. I don't remember it exactly. That nothing special, just some rocks. I was thinking, and I got to myself thinking, it's like they may not be special, but I'm going to tell you what. But I'm thinking rocks are by far the most versatile and useful piece of scatter terrain you can make. They're also relatively simple to make, but the rocks can fit in pretty well much any setting you have. Forest, frozen wasteland, desert, swamp to some degree. Pretty much you name it, and you can plop some rocks down in there, and they won't look out of place. They're also incredibly easy to make, and in this series of videos, I'm going to show you how I make mine. This first one, I'm just going to be first video in this series. I'm just going to be showing you how I make my standard rocks. But another advantage to making rocks, it's if you have a bunch of scrap foam chunks, which I have plenty, it makes an excellent way to lower down your scrap pile, which for me builds up and up and up and up. But like I said, I'm going to walk you through the process of how I went from a couple chunks of scrap foam to making these. As usual, though, I'm only showing you how I make it, not the way that you have to make it. Take the methods I show you, put your own spin on it, and make it your own.
First thing you want to do is grab a couple chunks of scrap foam, or whole foam if you got it. But as you saw, I've got plenty of scraps. And did I mention I have plenty of scraps? And more and more and more. Here I just grabbed one of the scraps and grabbed my good trusty Olfa knife. And I'm going to start shaving off chunks to get it to the basic shape that I want. Cutting off all the sharp edges. As I said, shave small pieces off. Don't take large chunks all the time, because you can always take off more, but once it's off, it's kind of hard to add on. But again, you just want to shave to a basic idea of what you want. Get rid of all the real sharp edges. At least I do. Until, you eventually get to that point where you're happy with what it looks like. And right now we're just going for the rough shape, not the final shape. Okay, grabbing my foam and my expensive carving tool here, a pencil. I'm carving in some cracks, because I just want an old beat up looking stone, and grabbing a carving tool I have that I'm using to pull out small chunks. You can use your fingernails or whatever you got on hand. This is just what I prefer to use. And of course, following that up with some more cracks, and moving on to a different area and ripping out more chunks of foam, and basically rinse and repeat the process until I eventually get to a point where I'm happy with how it looks. So these are not big, expensive, fancy tools, just bare minimum. You could do without the carving tool that I'm using. You just use your fingernails if you want, or anything to pull out chunks. Now I'm happy with how it looks, so I'm using the oh-so-fancy foil ball texturing technique to put in some texture to the foam. This will help smooth over some of the sharper edges that are left from the carving, which definitely will help and give it a more natural look, I guess. But in the long run, this will help and give you a better look as far as how I like it. Of course, now we're going to move on to the oh so wondrous black Mod Podge step. This is a step I like to do just to give the phone some extra strength and make it more durable. I want 100% coverage on this, so just basically slopping it on. Not so heavy that it'll hide any real details that I just made, but I do want a decent coverage with this. Of course, now I want to move on to the step where I put on the base coat gray, which is my go-to Apple Barrel's dark blue-gray. I'm going for 100% coverage on this. I want to get in all the nooks and crannies and all the little divots I've made and the cracks. Now I'm going to add my preference of adding some streaks of color to the stone because I want to have a little splash of color. For these rocks I'm using Deco Art's True Ochre, and I will eventually be using Deco Art's Rookwood Red. I just like putting a little splashes of color to give it a little something extra, but this step you can skip if you want. Now that I've got all my color streaks on, I'm going to give it an overbrush, about 80 to 85% coverage of my personal go-to for this shade of Apple Barrel's Pewter Gray. It's just my personal preference, so again, 80-85% coverage, not looking to get all the deep recesses and the deepest part of the cracks. Just a nice little overbrush. And now I'm going with my standard Apple Barrel Granite Gray for highlight dry brush, using an old beat up makeup brush that I got from a Dollar Tree. No need to spend a lot of money on this. I don't want to get a whole lot of coverage. Again, I'm just doing a dry brush, trying to get all the high edges and corners and also happy things like that. Of course, now I'm going for a wash. I'm going with my go-to dark brown wash because that's just what I prefer over the standard black. I think the brown does a better job at giving rocks a dirty, more natural look than a black wash would. Again, this is just my personal preference. Now that the wash is dried, I'm going over again with Apple Barrel's Granite Gray to bring up the edges, but I'm only actually touching the piece from the top going down. I'm not going up and down, left and right. I just want to highlight the shadows and stuff. And here I'm using a pigment powder to add some shadows and some dirt effects. This actually is not a pigment powder. This is some scraped soft pastel chalk, which essentially what pigment powder is, I think. I don't know. But this has the same exact effect as the pigment powders and is a lot cheaper to use. Plus, if you buy the pastel chalks, you get a big variety of colors, so you can custom mix colors if you want with this. But I'm just using some makeup brushes, again from the Dollar Tree, to apply it. And I'm trying to keep it above the cup. And as you can see, it actually looks pretty good for cheap pigment powders. And now I'm doing what's called setting the powder. I'm just using some isopropyl alcohol to basically activate or set the powder in so it kind of will stick to the terrain more long term than if you didn't. Because if you don't do this, there is the possibility of it rubbing off. Will it lose some of that powdery effect? Yes. Yes, it will. But it will last a lot longer if you do this. Because if it gets handled, it's going to rub off. And because I want a little splash of color on these stones, I'm going to be adding some moss. Could you go without this step? Absolutely, you could. But I want a little splash of color because these are rocks. And let's be honest, there's nothing really special about rocks. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't look good while sitting on the table. So, again, I'm just adding some moss and following cracks and certain spots. Whatever I think looks good at the moment. I don't put too much thought into where the placement goes other than following cracks and whatnot, but I just want a small amount of color on it so it looks good while it's sitting on the tabletop and looks just a little bit more special.
Hey y'all, if you made it this far, it means you watched to the end, and I really do appreciate that as always. If you liked what you saw, hit the like button. If you want to see more, click subscribe. If you want to contact me directly, I do have a Discord where there's a link in the About tab of my page. You can get a hold of me that way. Give me future ideas or something specific you want to see. If I can do it, I'm going to do it. Again, the simple rock, well, some may not consider it anything special. I like rocks because they're easy to make. I use my scrap foam to make them. So I've got a massive pile of scrap and it's helping cut down on the scraps. And it doesn't take any special tools to go from this to this. So if you're a newer crafter, these are perfect for you to make. Like I said, you don't need to buy any. You didn't see my Proxon being used at once at this. So I think the fanciest tool I used in this was my Olfa knife. So again, it's an easy piece of terrain to make, and you're never going to get more use out of simple rocks than you will any other piece of terrain. So here, you'll always remember though, when you're making your terrain, the only person you got to worry about is you, because it's your terrain.